Well, here we are again. This is episode 13 and it's day 8 of New Zealand's national lockdown. It's been over a week. So, here we are. It's a grey day outside and I don't think I've ever introduced myself. I'm Andrew Doubleday. I'm the pastor of the Opawa Methodist Church, which is a small congregation in the suburbs of Christchurch here in Aotearoa, New Zealand. Good to meet you. This morning, as we continue in our series in Matthew's Gospel, we're picking up the story in Matthew chapter 9, verses 27 through to 31. And so we read, "As Jesus went out from there, 2 blind men followed him, crying loudly, 'Have mercy on us, Son of David.' When he entered the house, the blind men came to him, and Jesus said to them, 'Do you believe I'm able to do this?' They said to him, 'Yes, Lord.' Then he touched their eyes and said, 'According to your faith, let it be done to you.' And their eyes were opened. Then Jesus sternly ordered them, 'See that no one knows of this.' But they went away and spread the news about him throughout the district." Wonderful, isn't it? Wonderful. I just wondered if we're noticing, as we've been working our way through Matthew's Gospel, how sequential it's been set out. Certainly it seems to be in the intent of the author that it has a sense of a story that is building, a story that is going somewhere. Today our text started with, "As Jesus went from there." Yesterday it was while he was saying these things. Tomorrow it's after they'd gone away. So we see the sense of a narrative which is continuing to unfold. It has a sense of an overall story that is being tied together. And if you don't believe me, just check back at where we've been. Go right back to the beginning of the Gospel and you'll see the way in which one thing sequentially leads into the next. That's the first thing. I just want to put it out there. I could have done it any day, but I've done it today. And I want to also notice now that we have 2 blind men that are seeking Jesus. And the thing that has struck me about this is that the blind who can't see yet recognize more clearly who he is. "Son of David," they cry, "Son of David." And what they're doing here is they're acknowledging who he is. Not just that he's Jesus of Nazareth, but that he is in fact the Son of David. And for the Jewish people, that was an acknowledgement of his messiahship. An acknowledgement that he was the one for whom they waited, the coming one, the one who was going to deliver them, the one who was going to set up a kingdom that couldn't be taken away, free them from the oppressors, a one where a time of tremendous prosperity and life was coming. And they recognized, although they couldn't see with their eyes, they had this sense of Jesus as this coming Messiah, Son of David. We notice too that if we look at the Gospels, that it's the blind who fairly consistently have this. We see it later on in the same Gospel, Matthew 20 and 30. They address him the same way. In Mark's Gospel in chapter 10 verse 47, where it may be a parallel story, address him the same way. In Luke's Gospel 18 and 35, we see the same thing. It's the blind who address Jesus as the Son of David. And John chapter 9 verses 35 to 38, they don't use that title, but they recognize, this blind person recognizes and believes in Jesus' messiahship. And so as Jesus passes by, their cry is consistent. They see Jesus very well. And so they follow. I imagine they tag along behind the crowd. Jesus is going to home. I imagine it's his Peter's house and he is back there and they find their way in. And they put their request to Jesus. And so he asks them, "Do you believe I'm able to do this?" Well, they've heard the stories. They've heard so many of the way in which Jesus has healed people, of the life-changing effect that Jesus has had on the lives of many. And they have a longing in their heart. They have a yearning. They want to be able to see. And there's a sense of desperation. They're not letting this opportunity go by, and they're willing to give Jesus a go. They, in their minds, have nothing to lose and everything to gain. The cost for them, in their minds, is low. There will be some things that, when they've thought about it, and I imagine they already have, they recognise will have to change. And the first thing is that they'll have to work. They may not have learnt a trade. It may be labouring jobs that they'll get. They know that they have to work. But for them, it is worth it. And they're stepping out in faith, and they know that it's worth doing. Here's the thing. The tragedy is that so many of us prefer misery. I've seen it. I've sometimes seen it in myself, and I've seen it in others that I've walked with. Misery is familiar. Misery is safe. Misery is something so often we have learned to cope with. We know how to live with it. And it's familiar, as I said. It may keep us small. For some of us, the risk of disappointment, if we head down this path, disappointment again is just too high. It is just too painful. It is safer to stay in the small corner in which we've parked ourselves. Others don't believe that they deserve to be happy. They don't believe they deserve to be whole. They don't believe that they deserve to be free. That also is tragic. And so they stay just where they are. The price is not worth trying to pay. And others wouldn't know how to live in this new state. The idea of being free, the idea of being whole, the idea of being happy is actually quite scary. How do I live with that? Don't understand what that looks like. The challenge is too great, and they believe that they could not adjust to that. Now you may be sitting there thinking that's ridiculous. Or you may be thinking, actually, that describes me pretty well. For some, misery is okay. It may keep us small, yet it's known, it's safe, it's manageable, and we know how to handle it. As I said, I've walked with people like this, and it can be heartbreaking. One of the other things I observe is that often they believe it's never their fault. It's always someone else who's to blame. If someone else would start treating them right, if someone else would recognise who and what they are and start to live with them accordingly, if someone else would give them what they need, then everything else would be okay. Things would come right. In the end, as these two men have done, we need to be willing to take some responsibility for ourselves. And Jesus asked these two blind men if they're up for healing. Are they willing to take responsibility for their part? And it was a simple little thing. And it was simply to affirm that they believed that Jesus was able to do this. Too right they were. And they were in with both feet. They know what they wanted. And they're absolutely clear-sighted about it. And they're confident that Jesus can give it to them. Whatever the price is, they are willing to pay it. And what happens? They get what they desired. And finally, I love how the story ends. Here they are, they've got what they've longed for and maybe have been yearning for years. They are now able to join the rest of the human race as full partners. They're able to participate fully in life. They're no longer dependent in the way that they were with others, and have recognized the gift that they have been given, and it fills them with joy. So I love how the story finishes. Jesus says to them, "Don't tell anyone what's happened to you." Now I understand in the Greek that it's not just a don't tell, it's a very stern, firm, you do not tell anybody what has just happened to you. And you're thinking, you're joking, Jesus. Surely that's like telling the sun that it's not to rise. It's going to happen. I love the way that Eugene Peterson puts it. But they were hardly out the door before they started babbling it to everyone they met. How could they not? How could they not? How could Jesus really expect otherwise? But it raises a question for each of us. Imagine if we were all that excited about what Jesus has done in our lives, or about what Jesus is doing in our lives. If we had something of the excitement of these two formerly blind men. And we could be formerly anything, just add the words behind to describe our own lives. Formerly depressed, formerly miserable, formerly broken-hearted. Formerly, we could have a whole lot of words that we could put behind that. Formerly racked with guilt, with shame, with a deep sense of our unworthiness and sin. Imagine if we actually started to see it with the same measure of gratitude and appreciation and joy that these two blind men responded to Jesus with, and responded to their changed lives with. Imagine what our societies, imagine what our communities, imagine what our families might start to look like if we were as appreciative, as grateful, as joyful about the changes that have happened in our lives as these two blind men. God bless you.